Hey guys, welcome back to Blind Strike Exotics. I'm John, and this is Annie. She is my Lemon Blast female, which is pastel and pinstripe. And the reason why she is here for the start of the video, even though she's in shed, is I want to start a short video series on ball python genetics. Specifically the differences between codominant, dominant, and recessive genes. And then I'm going to have a third video probably about allelic combos, which I'll explain later. I'm not a biologist, I'm not a scientist, but this doesn't need to be hard. It probably seems overwhelming to understand when you're first getting into the ball python world and you go on MORPH market and there's thousands of different genes and genes combos, and if you want to breed a snake, how do you get it? It's not always as simple as just buying that snake and it passes that gene along. The reason I have Annie out is because of the two genes she does have. Pastel is a codominant gene, and it is, I think, the most widely available gene on MORPH market. When I checked today, there were 6,000 plus snakes on there that had pastel in it, and I think there was like 19,000 listed on the site. So there's about 30% of the snakes on there have the pastel gene in it. And pinstripe is a dominant gene, and I'll explain to you what the difference is in this video between the codom and the dom, the codominant and the dominant genes, and when you're breeding the snakes, what are the best odds of you getting those genes in their offspring. So I'll try to make this very simple for you guys. I'm not going to go into great detail about the scientific aspect of it. I just want to give you guys like a dummies guide for ball python genetics, so it's easy to understand for everybody. So let's dive in. All right, let's start off by explaining what a codom and a dominant gene is. Codom meaning codominant. The basic difference in layman's terms is codominant gene means, let's take pastel for instance, it's a codominant gene. You can have a super form of that gene, meaning there can be two copies of pastel in this snake, and they would call that a super pastel. With a super form of a gene, you can have super pastel, super mojave, super enchi, super lesser, and there's too many to list off here, but that's just a quick example. That means that if you breed that snake, let's say she's not a super pastel, let's just pretend she is. Every hatchling, every offspring of hers would carry on one copy of the pastel gene. So every time you see the word super in a snake, it means that snake is going to carry on one copy of that gene to all of its offspring. 100% of its babies are going to carry that gene. So if she's super pastel, every single baby is going to carry the pastel gene. And that works through, if she has, if she was super pastel and super enchi and super orange dream, she would pass on one copy of every single one of those genes to her offspring. So if you have a snake that has those three genes in it and they're all supers, then you have a very awesome snake and you're gonna have some very awesome offspring as well. But it's not very common to find a snake that has that many super forms of a gene in it. Now, she only has one copy of pastel, so that means that generally with the odds, 50% of her babies should carry the pastel gene. That's not guaranteed. You know, one baby could come out with that gene, and all of the babies could come out with that gene. But typically speaking, on average, because she has one copy of pastel and she's not super pastel, 50% of her babies should be pastel. Now, as far as the dominant genes go, pinstripe is a dominant gene. And they're starting to find, they used to think leopard was also a dominant gene. but they're starting to think that there is a super leopard form. Spider is also thought to be a dominant gene, sort of, because if you try to breed two spiders together, anything that would be super spider would actually be lethal. So we're just going to talk about this girl right now, the pinstripe. There's no super form of a dominant gene, so you can't get a super pinstripe. So basically, when she breeds with another snake, everything has a 50% chance of being pinstripe. No more, no less, unless the father also carries the pinstripe gene, which is more math. So basically, as we're talking just about this female, she's pastel, she's pinstripe. She has a 50% chance of passing on each one of those genes. Pastel being codominant, meaning you can create a super pastel, and pinstripe being dominant, meaning that you cannot have a super pinstripe snake. It's not possible. What I'm going to do next is show you some combos to show you what you can get out of a single gene animal and a super form of that animal. I have a lot of enchis and super enchis in my collection. And then at the end of the video, I'm going to show you guys a really cool combo. And sometimes, when you take a single gene and you get a super form of it, it has an unexpected reaction to what the snake's going to look like. So stay tuned at the end of the video for that. But I think first here, we're going to start off with enchi and super enchi. All right, so what we have here is a single gene enchi female and a super enchi orange dream female. I don't have any just plain super enchi snakes. As you can see, the orange dream obviously brings out a lot of the yellows and oranges. This snake, the single gene enchi, is really just kind of chocolates and blacks. There's a little bit of kind of digitization on her scales going up the sides. This female is very orange. As you can see, the pattern is pretty reduced on her. Basically, what you're looking at between these two snakes, the difference is that most snakes undergo a pretty big change when you have two copies of the same gene. Super enchi typically reduces the pattern a lot, and it does brighten up the pattern as well. So this female, the single gene enchi, if she breeds, has a 50% chance of passing on the enchi gene, whereas this female, she's a super enchi. She has a 100% chance of passing on enchi to every single one of her offspring. Now, she's also orange dream, and that means that there's a 50% chance of her passing on orange dream. So her offspring are all going to carry one enchi gene and 50% chance of being orange dream. I guess it's good to say, if your snake is a super, it cannot pass on the super to its offspring. That can happen if you have a super male and a super female and breed them together. All of their offspring will be super, but she has two copies of enchi. She's a super enchi. She cannot pass on both of those genes. It's impossible. She can only pass on one copy of it. So when you breed two supers together, if I bred two super enchis together, all of the offspring would be super enchi. But if you only have one parent, then it reduces the chance of that. If I were to breed, let's say she was a male, if I were to breed super enchi to enchi, you're going to have, I believe, a 75% chance of them coming out to be all super enchi. So it's really an odds game. Morph Market has a fantastic genetic calculator where you can type in the genetics that your snakes have, and it will calculate for you what your odds are of hitting specific gene combos. So it's a really useful tool. I highly recommend it if you don't know off the top of your head. This girl likes to run every single time I get her out. if you don't know off the top of your head how to calculate it, or if you have two snakes that have a bunch of genes, you know, what are your odds of getting specific gene combos out of it? But typically, when you have a superform of a snake, and if you have a superform, that means it's a codominant gene, it makes a drastic change to the either coloration or the pattern of the snake. And as you look through Morph Market, you can look you know, for the super versions of all the snakes, and a lot of them get really crazy pretty quick. And I can show you that here at the end of the video. Now you can also mix two or more codominant genes together, and I really don't think there's a limit on how many genes you could fit in there. The limitation would really just be the breeding and how many, you know, you'd have to have two snakes with a ton of different codominant genes to get more than, you know, 3 or 4 genes in there. But again, this is our single gene enchi female, and this girl over here is leopard and enchi. And as you can see, it cleans the pattern up a lot, it reduces it, and it changes the color a bit. You know, this girl is just very dark, the single gene enchi, and the leopard enchi is more browns and gold tones. So you can mix in, as far as I know, an infinite amount of codom and dominant genes together, and really any genes, as long as you have, you know, the snakes that carry a ton of genes. You know, this girl being leopard and enchi, half of her offspring have a chance of carrying on each one of those genes. And, you know, again, this girl, she's enchi, half of her offspring will be enchi, and half of them will be just regular, normal ball python. You know, what they call the OG, the original ball python. Now here is an example of how adding a few different genes together can make a big difference in what a snake looks like. Now these don't carry the same gene. This girl here is a cinnamon and a super pastel, which is a sterling, and this girl here is a black pastel. Black pastel and cinnamon look very similar, and they interact very similarly with different genes, so I'm kind of using it as an example. I'm just pretending she's cinnamon for this video. Cinnamon is one of the darker genes. It still kind of keeps the alien heads that a normal ball python would have, but when you take cinnamon and you mix it with super pastel, which is what this girl has, as you can see, it greatly lightens up the snake and even reduces the pattern a bit. Pastel is a lightening gene. It makes the pattern a lot lighter, brightens up the snake a lot. So there's a lot of mixing and matching you can do. Had to put the snakes back because neither one of them was cooperating. But when you combine genes together, they can make a lot of unexpected color and pattern changes to them. As with the last two, you know, the cinnamon and black pastel gene is super dark, really makes a dark pattern. But when you put in pastel and even really super pastel, it brightens the whole snake up. It almost makes it look like it's a completely different snake. And again, when you go on Morph Market, you know, you can plug in all those different genes, and you can click on what the genes make, and it'll actually come up and show you pictures of all the different snakes and the combos it makes. Now we're going to talk about some codominant genes that have very unexpected results when you mix them together. This girl is a pastave, which is a pastel and mojave. We're going to disregard the pastel gene here for this segment because that's not what I'm worried about. Telling you guys about, it's the mojave gene. The mojave gene is typically seen because it changes the alien heads on the side of the snakes into kind of keyholes, and it starts bringing some blushing up the side of the snake. This snake, the mojave gene, is in the blue-eyed leucistic family. So when you make a super form of the super mojave, you get this. This is Shredder. He is my super mojave male. He's also banana too, and I'll go into that in a little bit. This white snake here is the super form of this dark patterned yellow snake here. the Blue-eyed Lucy family, which includes Mojave, Mystic, Lesser, Butter, Phantom, Bamboo, they have a lot of unexpected results when you mix them together. So this boy here actually carries the banana gene too, and I know that because I bred him. But you cannot see that he's banana at all. He is all white. He has the typical lavender head there on top, because when you have Super Mojave or Super Lesser or Super Butter or Mojave Lesser, it masks every other gene you have in there. There is no way to confirm what other genes it has unless you breed that animal. So this boy will pass on Mojave to every single one of his offspring. And the cool thing about like the Blue-eyed Lucy family is you can mix and match the genes to get a bunch of different combinations and end results. If you breed a Mojave to a Mystic, you get a Mystic Potion, which is a kind of a purpley lavender gray snake that still has a little bit of pattern, but it's very reduced. And if you've seen my top 5 biggest snakes video, if you didn't check it out, my biggest snake is a Mystic Potion. So you'd be able to see the difference there. But there are some very unexpected results when you mix and match codominant genes and when you get super forms of those genes. So it's very cool to experiment. There's a lot of people at the forefront of introducing new genes into seeing what they can do with combinations, and especially when you're putting 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 codominant genes together in a snake. And you know, a lot of people are starting to mix that into the recessive genes too, which are clowns and pieds and sunsets. So there's a lot of experimentation. It's very cool. And one of Shredder's breeding partners for this year is this Super Phantom here, which is also a Blue-eyed Lucy. When you mix a Super Phantom with a Super Mojave, we'll get Purple Passions. So all of their babies will come out as Purple Passions, and now he also carries banana, so there's potential they'll carry the banana gene too. And I don't know if that's going to show up or not in their offspring. I've never actually seen that combo, so we'll see. But you know, a Super Phantom in the Blue-eyed Lucy family looks completely different than the Super Mojave snake. She still has a ton of pattern, she has tons of color, and you would be able to mix other genes into this combo and see the effects of it. Whereas I could put any other genes I wanted to into the Super Mojave and you would not see any of them until you bred him to another snake that was not, you know, Mojave or lesser. So you need to really do your homework when you're choosing snakes to breed, and to see what the combinations in those snakes are really going to bring to you, because you don't want to have unexpected results. You know, you want to breed a Mojave to another Mojave, to a Pastave, and your snakes come out all white, and that's not what you wanted. You don't want to be kind of caught off guard by that. So do your research before you're buying your snakes if you end up wanting to breed them. But that's pretty much it here for the codom and dominant segment. Codoms pretty much, I think, make up the biggest portion of snakes on Morph Market and in the ball python genetic world. There's just a lot more of them that they've found so far than the other genes. So more than likely, everything you're going to find, or most of what you're going to find, is going to be codominant, and that means that they should all be able to, you know, create super forms of that snake. But definitely check first. Check online before you buy something to know what you're buying, and check the genetic calculator to make sure, you know, if you breed two together, you're getting the results you expect. But hopefully that kind of explains to you how codominant and dominant genes work. Codom genes, you can have a super form, meaning the snake carries 2 copies of that gene. If the snake is a super, it will pass on that gene to every single one of its babies. If it's not a super, there's a 50% chance of it carrying on that gene to its babies. If the snake has a dominant gene, which is there's very few dominant genes out there, But let's take pinstripe, for example. There's no super form. So it's going to pass on pinstripe to 50% of its offspring. So super, all the babies have that gene. Not super means they have one copy of the gene, and half of their babies will carry that gene. I think in the next video, we're going to go over the recessive genes, which are the pieds and the clowns and the sunsets and the albinos. And I'll explain to you how those genes work. It's kind of similar to how the codoms work. Technically, you know, when you see a pied snake, it's technically a super pied, if you want to think of it like that. But I'll explain that to you guys a little better in the next video. So hopefully you guys understood everything here. If you have any questions, please let me know. Comment down below. And please remember to like and subscribe. See you later.